hope you've enjoyed today's activities. I have a lovely story here that I've written about a boy called Sydney. It's called Treasure at the Museum. Maybe you'd like it for a bedtime story. Get comfortable. Here we go. Treasure at the Museum. Sydney was a little boy who lived in a very big city. He loved to help his dad at work when he was on his school summer holidays. Sydney's dad worked in the City Museum. It was the most amazing place. It had all sorts of collections on different floors. Each one looked different and smelt different. Sometimes it smelt very dusty, and other times it had a lovely, delicate perfume that wafted all round the artefacts. It was Sydney's dad who had to look after each of the collections at the museum. They both had a favourite place, however, to be, and that was the ancient Egyptian department. Huge pictures of eagles and swans with very important looking kings looking back at Sydney when he wandered through each section. He loved the tiny wooden cats, which his dad had told him were 5,000 years old. There were beautiful solid walls with lots of engravings cut out into different shapes. It looked like a different language. The best part of being with his dad was that Sydney could go into the parts of the museum that no one else could go. No one who visited the museum could go where Sydney's dad could go, and this made Sydney very proud. There was one room that Sydney's dad worked in. He had a computer, a desk, but on the other tables lay pieces of rock, stone, old wood, microscopes and strange boxes which looked like there was soil in them. One day when Sydney was in that particular room, he noticed his dad was very busy doing lots of paperwork. Sydney felt that this was a little boring and would much rather look around at some of the new things that he could see in his dad's office. His dad told him he could look but not touch, as the items were thousands of years old. Sydney did his best not to put his hands on any of the objects and slowly went round looking at the weird and wonderful displays that were in front of him. Palm leaves with paintings, a blue bracelet which looked like it had been made from a special stone, and rings which had a picture of an eye on them all lay there. Sydney's dad told him that he might have some time later to take Sydney to his favourite pizza place if Sydney was patient. And Sydney tried to be very patient, but he was getting very bored in the office. He looked at all the items at least 5 times, and he was just interested in seeing something new. Perhaps he could go to the department where the woolly mammoths were, or the saber-toothed tigers. No, his dad wouldn't let him do that on his own. Oh dear. He decided to look at the rocks again. Plain brown rocks. They nearly all looked the same colour. He couldn't believe that anyone would think that these were important. He wouldn't even notice them in his garden if they'd been lying there. Suddenly, the light from a nearby window made one of the rocks shimmer. Sydney looked a little closer. Yes, it was shimmering. His dad wasn't looking at that moment, so Sydney picked up the rock in his hand for a closer inspection. He slightly squeezed the rock. Oh no dear, the rock wasn't a true rock at all. It was just very hard sand that had crumbled in his hand. He knew he was going to be in trouble. He had just destroyed one of the new items for the museum, which must have been at least 5,000 years old. The crumbled mess was still in his hand. But when he looked closer, there was a bright piece of something gold. Sydney shook the sand away, and there in his hand was the most beautiful golden necklace anyone had ever seen. By this time, Sydney's dad had looked up from his desk and guessed what was going on. Sydney was sure he was going to be in trouble, but instead his dad smiled the best smile ever. You see, Sydney had found an ancient necklace belonging to a very important pharaoh thousands of years ago. It turned out to be the most important finds the museum had ever had. On closer inspection, there was a symbol that looked a bit like the handle of an umbrella, like this. Wow! Sydney's dad explained that this was an Egyptian symbol for the letter S. The person who it had belonged to had a name beginning with the letter S, just like Sydney's name. When the summer holidays were over and Sydney was back at school, he told all his friends about finding the necklace. One day, Sydney's dad came into school to tell his class about his job at the museum and all about how Sydney had found the most exciting treasure ever. For Sydney, that was the most amazing day. I hope you like that story. See if you can find anything important if you're beginning digging out in the garden. Good night.